Hello and welcome back to another episode of our draft series. Today, John and I are going to be talking about Cade Klubnik, quarterback out of Clemson, guy that had a lot of hype coming into his first time starting at Clemson, a guy that still had a lot of hype coming into this past season for Clemson. Clemson was a top 10 team in the country preseason, had a really disappointing year. I think Klubnik's year was similarly disappointing, but this is a guy that's still being talked about as a mid-round draft prospect that has some intriguing tools. So, John, looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, looking forward to getting into this one.
All right. Klubnik is a guy, like I said, there were people that thought this guy was going to be a first-round prospect, maybe top half of the first-round guy, had a lot of hype, finished the year really strong. Last year, I think acquitted himself pretty well in the playoff game against Texas at the end of the year last year, even in a loss, to where people thought if you can take this momentum that you've got from this past season, you got two receivers returning in TJ Moore and Wesco that are both really talented, along with Antonio Williams, I think, who's in the draft this year, who's a talented receiver as well. So you had three players on the receiving core that are really talented, plus multiple guys on the defensive end. I think they might have 2-3 first round picks on the defensive side of the ball this year. There was a ton of hype around this Clemson team. You had a returning quarterback that had a lot of hype, had been around for a while at Clemson, and everything kind of just fell flat on its face. And we will get to the clips I pulled are from the LSU game. So we'll see. I mean, that's the first game of the year. There was a ton of hype on that game. Both those teams kind of stunk by the end of the year, but we'll look at some of the plays from that game and kind of see what happened for Klubnik and for Clemson this year. Yeah, I'm curious what if you maybe not getting into like the good and the bad just yet, but if you had to kind of just summarize like how you would describe Klubnik as a player, his play style, kind of what he does to win, where would you go first?
I think that this is going to get into some of I'm not a big fan overall, but I think generally I would say he's a little bit of he can run a little bit, he can give you some quick game stuff, and I think overall that is what he does best. And that's really what Clemson wanted to do. They tried to really get his legs, utilize his legs. They tried to do a lot of RPOs. They tried to do a lot of designed quarterback runs this year. And I think that to a certain extent, some of that is helpful. And then he was at his best in some of that short game. Really quick, get the ball out of his hands really quick before he has to do too much downfield.
Agreed. I felt like he had overall pretty solid tools. You could see why, if somebody was projecting improvement from where he was last year to this year, why people would have been excited about him, because he is a guy that you watch and there's some flashy plays. There's some running mixed in with his game. He's an aggressive player. He's not a plus in terms of size, but he's 6'2", 207, kind of similar to the Nussmeier ish.
Mm-hmm.
Range for him. He looks a little bit more rocked up to me, a little more physical than a guy like Nussmeier or Simpson is. I think he for sure is a step up in terms of an athlete from Nussmeier. But like you said, I felt like they had to work the offense around his skill set, and that was noticeable as the year went on, especially when they started to play worse teams that they were more talented than, where it felt like the offense became a lot more we're just going to spread it out and you're going to throw 5-yard hitches and run. And that's going to be the offense. And I think when you watch the LSU game, that's not what the goal was. The goal was to be a more complete offense, to allow him to process and make reads down the field. And it just didn't really work. And so they moved away from that. They kind of, I felt like they got back more into the typical Clemson offense by the end of the year and kind of reverted back to some of those things. But I don't think that was a mistake by the coaching staff. I think that was them understanding the type of player that they were dealing with and what was going to fit Klubnik's skill set the most.
Yeah, and I think part of the desire to want to do some more complicated things and really push the ball came from like, okay, we think this guy is talented. He's a very seasoned player. I mean, he's a guy who he played like his entire time at Clemson. He has like 1,400 attempts. Uh, and you could compare that to like Mendoza and Nussmeier, who also played a good bit. They only have 1,000 attempts. And then, those are guys that are seen as like pretty seasoned players at this point. But like Klubnik played a lot. So I think that coming into the year, Clemson had a lot of high hopes about what they might be able to do with him. And I think that they had to readjust and really change course with the offense to kind of mitigate some of the things that I don't think he does very well.
And with the talented receiving room they had, I think they expected, we're going to be able to play big boy offense this year. We're not just going to have to run gimmick stuff. Like we should be able to win down the field.
And they brought back like all 5 offensive linemen too, so I don't think that they thought pressure would be a concern. And to some extent, that was, especially when we get into some of the LSU. I don't know which clips you pulled, but pressure was a real concern in that game.
Yeah, their offensive line was very disappointing this year. I think it was much worse than people expected, and that gets to like why you fall back into the quick game kind of stuff. Yeah. Like if you can't block up, then that's what you're just got to get the ball in your playmakers' hands and trust that they'll pick up yards after the catch.
And some of that obviously is not on Klubnik, and then some of it I think he kind of contributed to some of the concerns there, as we will get into the specifics of his eval.
I think there's other prospects, like more talented guys, that would have been able to navigate the situation better, even though, yes, it was not the best situation to be in. I honestly don't think the situation at LSU is much different for Nussmeier. I think they similarly had some struggles along the offensive line, but had a really talented receiving room. But I think you saw like LSU was still able to push the ball down the field more consistently throughout the season. And I do think that's a credit to the differences between these two quarterbacks. So, all right, let's get into some of the positives for Klubnik. I think in general, I would say he is I think he has solid NFL traits pretty much across the board. Like there's the mobility's pretty good. The arm flashes at times. In general, he can be explosive. I thought he had like a pretty quick trigger, especially in the quick game. Like his release is pretty quick. So there's a lot of those traits that are solid. And if you put together his highlights, you'd say like, okay, I can see why people were excited about this guy coming into the year.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I had him. I was trying to look back at some of the hype coming into the year, and there were some people that were really talking up his tools. Like he had a really good arm. He was really mobile, really agile, and was able to do a lot. And I didn't really come away from the tape thinking his tools are that level. I thought they were adequate. They were good. They were fine. But I don't think that he is like this really like uber toolsy player who you're going to have a lot to work with and like this ball of clay to develop that maybe he was being billed as. But, I thought, like you said, the arm flashed at times, especially on some throws to the boundary and like one-on-one coverage. He does show some mobility. I think especially on scrambles. I would say as far as like his running goes, I thought that he was much better as a scrambler than he was as a designed runner. And that was one part of Clemson's offense that I think they may have misjudged his level of athleticism, especially against some of the better competition that they played, where like they were calling a lot of quarterback designed runs. They called a lot of RPOs. Obviously the RPOs, he's not running on many of those, but like they called a lot of plays where Klubnik had an opportunity to run intentionally. And on those plays, I didn't think the offense did very much with them. But where he had success as a runner was where pocket breaks down. He's able to get out and get an angle and get upfield to get some yardage. He's not a guy that's going to like outrun these really athletic defensive linemen. He's not going to – he might make a couple guys miss. I thought he had some agility downfield, but like he's not going to wow you as a runner.
Yeah, I think they had to run him a lot out of those empty sets just to have like keep the defense honest to some extent, because if like you have to force them to commit enough bodies to the run game even when you're out of empty to still be able to run what you want to. But yeah, he didn't blow me away in those snaps. I agree about like the agility. I thought he really like puts his foot in the ground hard when he cuts. Like he's a
Yeah.
guy that like really puts his weight into it. And then sometimes I thought on design runs when things are muddy and you're like really having to shoot a gap or cut through a gap, it didn't work as well. But when he had a lot of space in the open field, he could create some space and make a guy
Yeah.
miss. But he's definitely not a guy that you want running very much in crowded areas, or like I don't look at him as a guy that you can like give the ball to in the red zone and just be like, okay, go get me a touchdown.
Yeah.
It's not that
Definitely.
type of runner. All right, let's see anything else on the positives. Like I said, I think the quick game got better as the year went on. I think part of that was Klubnik adjusting and getting more comfortable in the offense. Like by the end of the year, that was a pretty efficient part of his game. I thought they did run. He looks better on throws where he does not have to like really lead a receiver or throw with touch. Like on those little 5 yard stops or like hitches, he can just throw a line drive to the spot and expect his receiver will catch it. I did not feel like in other circumstances that he was able to do that as much in the quick game, even though there are some RPOs where he has success. So, John, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the quick game and like how translatable you think this is to the NFL.
Yeah, so I think the quick game, I think that there is something there, especially with like, and this will get into maybe maybe like my grade on him. But if you needed somebody to come in and just run some like really simple basic concepts and like not put you too far behind the sticks, I think that he could make some of those plays happen in the NFL. But it definitely is something where it's like he is probably keying in on a guy early, like keying in on a specific matchup. He's making one read, and okay, that guy is or is not open. And if he is open, he's throwing it to him really quick. And if it's not, I think that's where you might have some more concern. So I don't think it's anything like high level or something you can really build an offense around, because I don't think it's something where he's given several options in the quick. He's really diagnosing what's going on too much.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's like the tools there to make you feel good about the quick game, but I'm still not sure this is exactly what it would look like in the NFL. I think there's just
Yeah.
more from a mental perspective that would be required. So, okay, I feel like that's a good jumping off point for us to get into some of the struggles with him because I do think that's one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
I think the decision making is just bad across the board. Like early down, middle down, late down, I don't really care. It's all just not great. There's some of the kind of Nussmeier type plays where it's late in the down and he's trying to make something happen and he forces something that he shouldn't. There's also just plays that where I just don't like his process whatsoever in like the actual progression of the play. So to me across the board, this is probably my biggest concern for him overall and really scares me in terms of his ability to translate to the next level.
Yeah, I agree. There were multiple times where I was like, I don't understand what you're doing. I don't know the reason you're making the decision you are, or why you were turning down some of the things. Like there were a lot of wide open receivers that he just didn't see. He's not making it back to, and I think part of it is
We'll see if
speed,
you.
like processing speed. It's like he he's not getting through his reads in time to make it to an open receiver. There were a couple times where even on that, where like the processing speed is so slow that, and sometimes it was an anticipation problem. He's not anticipating something coming open, so like he's not getting to it in time. There were a couple throws where like on the surface you might look at it and say, "Oh, it was a nice play." Like he made a nice throw over the middle of the field. But even on those, a couple of times I was like, okay, this was a throw that, I just watched Nussmeier, and Nussmeier was like anticipating the guy and throwing it before he made his break. Klubnik's like holding it, sees him, watches him make the break, and realizes, oh, that's open right now, and then throws it and barely fits it into a window. So it's like I don't think he's making those throws in the NFL. So even some of those what seem like positive plays, I don't think really are that positive. I don't think are going to be positive on the next level.
Agreed. I will save some of my thoughts there for the clips because I think there's one play that
Yeah.
summarizes this really well, and so we'll get into that in more detail. In general, you do just see times like throwing deep where I think he just throws the ball up into double coverage. Like there's
Yep.
not, I don't know that there's much decision making from like when it makes sense to throw a 50-50 ball versus when it doesn't. I don't know. There's just not a ton of discretion in Klubnik's game. I do think as well, the other probably biggest concern for me is the overall, um, I guess, just versatility and development in his throwing. There's just a lot of throws that miss high or long. And on
Mm,
top of that, he's a one speed thrower. He just doesn't throw with touch very well. And so I
yeah.
think those things are very correlated. Like he feels like he always has to rip a throw. And so it's just harder to be accurate when you're always throwing, line drive missiles to your receivers. And there's times where that hurts the offense and it results in a drop or an incomplete pass. There's times where the accuracy just is horrible as a result of
Mm,
that. So to me, that's probably the other largest concern I have with him is I don't know if the throwing is versatile enough and consistent enough for him from both an accuracy perspective and also a tempo perspective.
yeah. Especially like I thought this really fell apart under pressure. Like
Yeah.
the more pressure you got on him, the better chance that he was not going to make a throw. Like if you get people in his face, he probably was not completing it. Where like you see top quarterbacks, if they get pressured, even if they can't step into the throw, sometimes they're able to get it off and get it there accurately enough that their receiver has a chance and makes a play. And I felt like across the board with him, like he wasn't doing that. Uh, I thought on the run as well. Like you talk about a guy who's supposed to be kind of mobile. I didn't think he was very good at throwing on the run. I thought his accuracy really sprayed when he was
Yep.
throwing on the run. Um,
And I do think for somebody who was not great at throwing on the run, he also would put himself in those situations more often than he
mhm.
needed to be. He wasn't a
Yes,
guy
yeah,
that I like wanted to see out there trying to make a play on the run very often, but he would. I mean, I can't tell you. I feel like in the LSU game, it was like 50% of the plays he's rolling to his right, whether it's design
yes,
or he just is reacting to the pass rush. And there were times where the pass rush was getting home in that game, but there are other times where if he just keeps himself planted in the pocket, there's a receiver that's about to break open, and then he's got no shot to find him because he's running away from a defensive lineman or running into a sack. Like there's just a lot of times where he's, I think, a little early on the decision to end up using his legs. And when you compare that to like a Mendoza or a Nussmeier, like those guys just had much better feel of when it was time to
yes.
leave the pocket versus when it was time to stay in there and stick and maybe take a hit, but deliver on a throw down the field.
Yeah, and I thought generally the pocket awareness and mobility was bad. Like he didn't really he wasn't really feeling when the rush was getting there. Like he either felt it when it wasn't coming or he didn't feel it when it was. He also had very little feel for like when to step up into a pocket that was collapsing, but stepping up to give himself another second to make a throw. And especially when we talk about these quarterbacks that, he has a little more size like than Nussmeier or Simpson, but like not a whole lot more. And I don't think his arm is like very good. I think it's fine. And like if he isn't stepping into throws, he's losing out on a lot of velocity that he could put on some of these. And I think it affected some of his deep balls where like you mentioned he doesn't really throw with touch very well. I think some of those times it was because he wasn't really getting into the throw. He wasn't really
Yeah,
putting everything into it that he could. So like the ball is not and when we talk arm strength, there is like different types of arm strength, but like just in sheer distance, I didn't think he was able to throw it far down the field.
I agree. And I think that speaks to some of the line drive stuff we were talking about earlier. Like
Yeah.
that's the way he delivers the ball well. And if that type of throw doesn't make sense, like a deep throw down the field where you need to put a lot more arc and distance on it, it's just not going to look great. Okay. Any other concerns from you?
No, I think that covered it.
All
Oh,
right.
sorry. One more thing. I did think that he also stared down receivers. That goes back to some of the processing
Yeah.
part, but I felt like there were times where he locked in on a read and stared it down, and then sometimes would decide to throw it, and sometimes it'd be open, and there were quite a few times where it wasn't, and he's throwing into tight coverage.
Agreed. I think we'll see a little bit of that here on these clips. So let's get into it. First, here, this is a good example, I think, of when you see Klubnik try to over rely on his athleticism and panics a little bit. This play, to me, what looks like is happening here is, and there's who knows what the communication is, who knows what the play call exactly is, but this running back on this play, LSU's bringing pressure off the edge. It looks to me like this running back, there's no way he doesn't see this guy coming, right? Like, I mean, unless he's just like blinded in his left eye, right? Like, there's no way he doesn't see this. To me, that this looks like, hey, if we get delayed pressure, you need to leak out, and we've already got a tight end or somebody coming across the middle here. We're going to have a wide open guy here to check the ball down to. And I do think if Klubnik just sits in the pocket here, right there, when he starts to plant his feet and escape, if he dumps this ball out, I mean, the running back's whipping his head around like immediately here and is ready to make a catch. But he's already gone. Like, at this point, you can't make this throw. Like, you just don't have time. There's no way for you to get back across your body. And he also doesn't escape the sack anyways.
Yeah.
So he runs himself into a sack here. Randall here is a, converted wide receiver. Maybe he didn't do exactly what he was supposed to on this play. I'm not sure. But to me, Klubnik, there are times where he's got an answer and he instead tries to go create something himself when that's just not the best decision on the play.
Yeah, and he did this a few times. There's almost an identical play in the LSU game to this one where he feels that late pressure coming. He tries to roll right, and it still gets to him like immediately. Like he doesn't even make it out of the pocket before it's getting there. And the answer on the play was to dump it down. It was really funny because when I was watching the tape, I saw that play later, and I was like, that looked exactly like the other time it happened.
Yeah.
But it was a different play.
Yep, good call. It's something you see consistently. Okay, this is the play I was like, hey, let me save my comments and talk about it earlier, or talk about it later in the video when we get to the clip, because I think this is probably the one that concerns me the most. So LSU comes out here, and they're in a single high look the whole time. You've got your linebacker matched up on your tight end. You've got the linebacker matched up on the running back. This, to me, looks like a man coverage look out the gate. You've got your outside corners pressed up on the outside receivers. But even if you needed to wait and confirm that, at this point in the down, it's clearly man, right? Like, this is cover one. You've got Perkins kind of functioning here as this robber in the middle of the field and a single high safety. And at this point, like, wherever this safety goes, there's nobody else that's covering over the top here. Like, everyone else is in man. Klubnik just stares at this side of the field. Like, never turns his head. Never really... I'm not sure he knows what defense they're in. I don't know if maybe he thinks this is zone. I don't know. But he just... like, he stares down this receiver the entire play. And the safety... if he doesn't overthrow this, it might be a pick. Like, the safety has a really good chance to make a play on this ball. And on top of that, if you look down at the bottom of the screen, Wesco is like in disbelief that he does not get the ball here. I mean, you can see here, like, if he catches this and runs, like, he might have 6 out of this. And It's funny, you can watch his head just like look up into the sky right there when he realizes that he doesn't get the ball. But this is an example where I do think, like, most quarterbacks, at least like most like NFL prospects, would recognize this and get back to the backside dig. And if he does here, this is a huge gain for Clemson. And instead, it ends up in a dangerous pass that, honestly, if it was thrown more accurately, might get intercepted.
Yeah, and this was also a common occurrence for him. You go to watch the Georgia game, he throws a pick to Malachi Starks on basically the same play. He just didn't overthrow it this time. He threw an accurate ball, but the safety is able to get over there and make the play.
Repeated issues for sure for Klubnik. Okay, this is another example of a play where I think he just doesn't have a great feel for what the answer is. So at this point, like, it's all out pressure. Like, LSU is sending 7. They're keeping one guy high, but like you know exactly what you've got here, right? Like, you know it's man-to-man. You've got to find an answer quickly. You've got to get the ball out. Clemson has the perfect answer for this play. If you watch this tight end at the top of the screen, he blocks this up, like chips the guy and leaks out. And I mean, you could not ask for more space here. Rolls out and just chucks it up. And you're just like, man, like, if I was the offensive coordinator here, I'd be losing my mind on the sideline. Like, dude, I can't, like, we can't make this any easier. Yeah, like, we can't make this any easier. There's no better answer to pressure than that one, which is, hey, you can dump the ball 5 yards down the field. Like, doesn't even really have to be an accurate throw, and you're going to pick up an explosive gain, and he just rolls out to his right. Like, you just see it so often where that's the answer, and it's something that scares me for sure on his tape.
Yeah, I completely agree. There were a couple of these also where, like, either because it's, a hot receiver on pressure, or it's like a clear out and someone's coming underneath, and like he rarely made it to these checkdowns. He was panicking and thinking too much about the rush.
All right, we'll look at one more negative, and then I did make sure we ended on a positive for him, because there are still some good things from Klubnik's tape that he deserves credit for. This is another example of a play where I just am not really sure what the thought process is here. So at this point, the safety, who is, over the top, is rotating over to take the tight end coming up the sideline. And this is a great pocket. Like, they have this blocked up extremely well. You can see he's kind of already leaking out to the right. But what I'm seeing here is, again, Wesco, he's probably lost his mind after this game. The safety's rotating down. We've got a guy with a step on a DB going up the field with no help over the top. But Klubnik's already out the back. He's already out the door at this point with a good pocket, right? This is not poor protection by any means. He's rolling to his right, tries to make a throw on the rollout. But again, just like, I think maybe because he expected pressure on this play, because they came up and kind of showed a pressure look, he probably thought like, hey, I'm not going to have much time here, and maybe his internal clock gets off. But at this point, like, there's no reason to be escaping, and then results in a really difficult throw. So just, again, like, this type of stuff, I just don't really, you just can't have these kind of plays in the NFL when you have a chance at an explosive.
Yeah, and going back to what we said at the beginning, like, this is not a guy who just started playing. Who, it's not like Ty Simpson, where it's like, okay, he only played 1 year, so we think that with more experience, he attempts as Simpson did. Like, he played plenty of football. This is kind of who he is at this point.
All right, let's end with a good one. This is just an example of why you can get a little bit excited about Klubnik, which is, again, Wesco's cooking just all night, just burning guys. Here it's out of the slot, runs a slot fade. Yeah. This is a good example of a throw he actually puts really good touch on, and you see some of the arm talent here. This ball gets broken up, so it doesn't end up resulting in a big play. But you do see, like, when he sits in the pocket and actually plants his feet and, flips his hips and generates some velocity, he can make some really impressive throws. Like, that is an awesome throw. And, it doesn't result in a catch, but there's not that many college quarterbacks that have the tools to make this type of throw. And so for him, to me, one of my biggest questions going forward is just like, can you get yourself to do this more consistently? Because you see it on tape. It's just, it doesn't happen enough for you to have confidence that it's something that's going to translate to the next level.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that of his more successful plays, like he did this a few times into like man coverage or cover two beaters down the boundary. Like he made some nice throws, um, but to your point, like this didn't happen all that frequently. It'd be like a flash here, a flash there, and then the in between was some of the problems that we talked about, or they called the less successful designed runs. And when you take it in totality, it's like, okay, yeah, there's a flash here and there, but the overall picture, I was just not a very big fan of. And maybe that kind of gets us into like some of the comps and grade.
Yeah, let's go to the grade first. Actually, I feel like we've kind of like we're like 95% of the way there. So let's just jump to that and we'll end with comps. Um, I had a 7th round grade on Klubnik. I kind of went back and forth between like 5th through 7th. I think that I do think he will get drafted because the tools are pretty impressive, but I just think there's like such a long path to me from like what I would need to see in terms of growth for a guy that's played a lot of football. I just think like the odds to me of him eventually reaching the caliber of a starting quarterback, it just feels very low in my head. So, and it's not a guy with ridiculous enough traits where, like, even if this works, he's like, I do think his ceiling is still probably like an okay quarterback, not a really good quarterback. So for that reason, a lot of the limitations that we've talked about so far, I do think this is a draftable guy because of the tools, and I really went back and forth between like a 6th and a 7th round grade, but that's where I ended up with Klubnik.
Yeah, so I was kind of similar. I like debated, do you even draft this guy, because I hated the processing so much and the mental side of his game. But I kind of came back to what you said, like there's enough on there from a tool perspective and from like some of the flashier plays that I would take in like 6th or 7th round. I definitely a late day 3. I would not want to spend an early day 3 pick on him, because I think that you're going to be better served looking for more impactful players. Ultimately, and this kind of goes to some of the comps, but like I don't really see a path to starting quarterback
Agreed.
for Klubnik. I think that his best bet is to be a long-term backup, and even that I think is like maybe a little bit of a long shot. I think ideally he's probably going to be like the emergency quarterback, like the third quarterback for a team. And I think that there's a chance he can stick and do that for a while, but I don't even think he's going to be a number 2.
I agree. I think it's more likely than not that it just doesn't work. But there are enough tools where if it clicks, like he could certainly be a good backup. So yeah, that's kind of why I do lean towards like a draftable grade, like you said. But yeah, it's just really inconsistent. I do think that like it's just so funny with some of these guys. Like he probably has better physical tools than Nussmeier, but when you watch the tape, it's just so different in terms of the actual down to down consistency and the processing, all that. So, I mean, it tells you how important that stuff is at the quarterback position. So let's get into our comps. I kind of go back and forth with these guys on even if I should do like a best case, worst case, because worst case is basically just like you never play football in the NFL. But I'll start with my worst case and then throw it over to you. My worst case for him was a guy that I watched a couple years ago who, for some reason, the Ravens drafted, which I never understood. But Devin Leary is my worst case for him. I think he was a 6th round pick, which is like, I think I had him graded as like a 7th. He's a one speed thrower type of guy, got a pretty strong arm, and I also think he showed some improvement during his last year at Kentucky. Like you saw progress throughout the year and him continuing to make strides, but it was just really inaccurate. The risk reward was really off with him, and was like also a guy that people had high hopes for, and then it just never really came together. And I think Klubnik is similar to that. So Devin Leary is my worst case in terms of an NFL projection. It's basically just like you never play football, but I think this one probably translates more from like what happened in college and what type of player he was at that level.
Yeah, I don't know that I have like really a best case, worst case. Mine is like kind of just what level I think he's at. And I will say I stole this from Trevor Sikkema. I was kind of looking around for some comps because realistically, I don't think that he plays in the NFL. But Sikkema comped him to Aaron Murray out of Georgia a few years ago, and I think that's probably a good one. Um, just for like level of player. Aaron Murray also started a lot of games. He started like 4 years for Georgia. He played a ton. He had some success. Like if you just look at the raw numbers, but overall not a guy that blew you away physically. Like maybe did some things on tape, but like was not successful enough. Was not good enough at the mental side of the game to make up for not having elite tools. And that's kind of where I'm at with Klubnik. Is like, yeah, your tools are all right. They're pretty good. They're definitely draftable, but like you are not good enough mentally at this point to really run a successful NFL offense and it really stick around. Like Aaron Murray didn't stick for very long in the NFL.
I like that comp because I was 11 when he graduated from Georgia, so there is no way I'm going to be able to speak in an educated manner on Murray. So I like the like being able to pull back from those guys in like mid 2010s is like something there's no way I'm going to be able to do with any sort of confidence. So I appreciate that. The guy I ended up with, which I actually don't hate this. I was kind of like looking back through some of my old notes just on guys to see if there was anybody that, like, as I was reading the notes, it felt similar to Klubnik. The one guy I saw that, as I actually think is like somewhat of a reasonable best case, is Tyson Bagent. My notes were very similar for him, which was like a guy that's really twitchy and like pretty impressive from a tools perspective, not because he's huge, but just because there's some twitch, there's some athleticism to his game. He also had a lot of the consistency questions coming out of college and just like, how's this going to translate? Now, I think why this is his best case is Bagent had the small school questions and like, is it going to translate from a smaller level? And the answer for him so far has probably been yes. Like he's certainly been better than people expected him to be based on where he was drafted. Klubnik, there's just less uncertainty because you saw him play against good competition for multiple years of school. But in terms of like where people viewed Bagent at the time of the draft and then like what he's looked like now in his time as a backup with the Bears, I think that's probably what it would look like with Klubnik if it ends up clicking.
Yeah, I think that one makes sense. For the reasons that you said, and Bagent, if that worked out, I think that would be a really good case for Klubnik. Bagent, funnily enough, like after Caleb Williams' rookie year, everybody was like calling for Bagent to start, and like he's better than Caleb Williams, and I think we've seen some of this stuff in after Caleb Williams' second year that that's not really true. But Bagent definitely has kind of lived up to the higher end of his projection.
Yeah, I mean Ben Johnson like loves him.
Yeah,
It's really funny to hear him talk about him because it's like, yeah, I mean he's never gonna play here, but like this guy is I think at the end of last year it was quoted like this guy's definitely one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL. Like I'm confident in that. So I mean if that's the outcome for Klubnik, like that's a huge win based on how I feel about
great for
him going into the NFL. So yeah, he's not the lowest guy I've watched so far. He's above Sawyer Robertson still, but this is about what I expected to end up at with Klubnik's grade, like based on how the season went for Clemson. It would have been hard to understand how they were so disappointing if he was putting out like third round tape. Just like with an ACC schedule, I don't really know how that would be possible for them. So
yeah, that makes sense. Because honestly, I came into it a little more hopeful, just because of how long he has played.
Yeah,
and how Clemson has still won a lot of games. He's put up some good numbers in his time. So I came into it a lot more hopeful. And I think the first game I watched was NC State from last year, maybe. I'm not sure. And even in a game they won like 49-7, it was like, oh, there's just not much here that projects forward. Yeah. So it was a little bit of a surprise, and I kind of knew what I was getting into after that one.
All right, that'll do it for today's episode. I think I will be back next with a Diego Pavia episode, which was definitely a more enjoyable watch than Klubnik. We'll talk. Well, I'll have to. That's one where you kind of just got to figure out what actually translates to the NFL and what was more of a college play. But excited to come back with that one next. Jon, thanks again for joining today.
All right, thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And the draft is less than a week away, so I will be back soon with another episode. So keep tuning in, and we'll catch y'all next time.